So of all the chapters, I spent the most time on the introduction and chapter one, and there was some flip flopping and organizational issues, and the editor and publisher got upset at me more than once. But again, as I said, is I was adamant from the beginning of ensuring that this is something that flows well, that it communicates what I wanted to communicate, and so I spent a really long period of time, and the introduction, believe it or not, was upwards of 30 pages. When I went in and did some edits and changed this and tweaked this, and they were like, "No, we got to get it down to 7 pages," and it was grueling. I was able to do it, but it was grueling, and it really happened. A lot of it came together because I had essentially created this like routine that I did in the morning for month over month of getting up early, working out, doing this kind of meditation. There's something that Tim Ferriss, the author of 4 Hour Work Week, he has some blog posts as well as sections of his book that talk about how he gets into his like flow state, and it prepares himself to write. And so I followed that. That's one of the exercises I use. I use a Tony Robbins exercise as well as far as focus, and he calls it priming. And this is what I did like day after day after day, and even on Saturdays, even some Sundays. And and I got to this point where it was month after month, and I was editing the introduction in chapter one, and it just had blocks, major blocks. So I went down and actually visited Tom in Phoenix with my wife and our youngest at the time, and we just stayed at an Airbnb for a few days. And I remember it was awesome. I was doing these these specific priming exercises and getting inside, and Cynthia and Jack went to visit someone that they knew in Phoenix. So I was by myself at this Airbnb. And I just remember for a period of like 5 hours straight, nonstop, like a lot of things came together, and it allowed me to essentially put my heart into what I wanted to communicate in a very short amount of space, 7 pages. But I felt awesome about it, and the purpose of going going into that type of routine for me again was to right out of the gate explain and communicate my philosophy about money in a way that people could understand. And it's not even about money. I think money is a part of life, but I look at so many other aspects of life when it comes to what the purpose of our money management is and what we're trying to accomplish financially. And so I try to convey that as best I could. And like I said, it felt really good. I have very strong opinions on some subject matters, and it's because I've sought to understand really why people don't get ahead. Why are they stuck? Why do so many people do the exact same thing, but yet not necessarily understand why they're doing it? And so I wanted to get into some pretty controversial topics, whether it's the school system that we are part of, which if you look at the history, it's based on the Prussian school system, much different than how the original education in our country was. But the Prussian system is really where classrooms started to be partitioned into ages, where it wasn't that case before. You had young to old. And Horace Mann is in Massachusetts at the time. He's the one that developed our modern school system, which is very old now. But the purpose of it and the inspiration for it was from this, this Eastern idea, mainly in Prussia, and those countries to train, and their system was to train military. It was to train factory workers. It was essentially to train people to do what they're told and follow orders. And I look at our school system and it makes total sense. And I know it's evolved since then. At the same time, you look at what we're told to do in school, and it's from this hierarchical standpoint. It's usually information, not experience. And I look at how I learned and my the amount of effort and energy I put into following orders and going that direction. I never tapped into my creativity, and I realized that my B's and that type of like mediocre those mediocre grades and the mediocre outcome of school, right, was because I my tendency to be creative, my tendency to solve problems, my tendency to work with other people wasn't necessarily extracted in that type of environment. And that's where I became fascinated with, just the school system and how that operates. And I think that is definitely evolved, and maybe for good points, but also bad points. But how it's affected the workforce, and the workforce primarily being made up of those type of minds that have gone through kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, to 12th grade, through college, through grad school, all with a very similar mentality of being told what to do, not to think for themselves necessarily, but to think individually and to be told what to do by someone that has a higher authority. And I just don't think that's a healthy way of making progress and growing. And so, I look at my experience in business and managing others, leading others, how people work together. And I've had lots of failure and lots of disappointment, and I've lost friends over it. I've, had numerous sleepless nights trying to figure out business. And so the conclusions that I've came to and tried to explain in these first parts of the book were because of how strongly I felt about, where some of the issues that are associated with society, financial planning, the workforce, school, affects a person's fulfillment in life, and I feel really strongly about it. And I've continued to study and research, and obviously there's voids I have in my perspective, but I have seen just proof after proof of those that really take control of their life, and those that focus on what they're strong at, what they're good at, and apply that, whether it's to a role in business or apply that to a specific field, or it's not just the success that comes as a result, but it's also the happiness and fulfillment and kind of understanding of self-worth, if that makes sense. But I try to convey that and what that had to do with financial management, because I believe that in the financial world, which is run now by the typical financial planning model, is very similar. It's being told what to do with somebody that is perceived to have authority. And now we have multi-trillions of dollars in Wall Street, in bank money that has ultimately been saved or invested by the American public, yet has not done much good whatsoever for the American public. It's made a lot of people wealthy, but not the person who has essentially allocated money for decade upon decade, hoping that it would serve them later on in life. You guys are going to see a bunch of examples in the book. But again, this is introduction in chapter 1, just really setting the stage from a philosophical perspective, not just this is what you should believe, this is what you should do, and this is what you're going to get as a result. No, it's more of, here's why I have the ideas that I have. Here are the sources, and this is why I believe what I believe, and this is how it could potentially make a difference in your life if you opened your mind and were open to maybe some different ideas than the status quo. And I wanted to do that out of the gate, just to afford you the time and the energy, and because this is it's almost at 300. How many pages is it? It's over 300 pages. It takes a while to read it, and I realized that time is time that you would have to spend away from your family, or away from loved ones, or away from having fun times. And I wanted to make sure that in the introduction and chapter 1 set the stage so that you would know what you were getting yourself into. Okay, so now I'll maybe make a few other comments on chapter 1, then we can get into the meat of the book.